NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says member states agree Ukraine will join the alliance, but without setting a timeline. Stoltenberg was speaking at NATO's 75th anniversary summit in Washington. US President Joe Biden formally opened the event. He will also be hosting a dinner for NATO allies and partners at the White House. Biden has been seeking to reassure supporters at home and abroad that he's capable of continuing as president. Doubts about his fitness for office are overshadowing his re-election campaign. Now, DW's Alexandra von Nahmen is in Washington, D.C. following that summit for us. Alexandra, Joe Biden is hosting this summit under intense scrutiny. How was his performance today?
Well, his performance yesterday, his opening speech here at NATO summit, it did not contain any gaps, any stumbles, but he does not appear to be able to shut down doubters. And today we heard from Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House of the Representatives, who came forward saying, hinting that she would like Biden to reconsider his re-election bid. She said that she supports the president on whatever decision he is going to take, but that she thinks that time is running short and that after the summit, this conversation about the future of President Biden and his re-election, the conversation should start again. And that is quite something because Pelosi is the most senior Democrat to come out and to talk about that and to suggest that President Biden should reconsider his re-election bid. And she's doing that while the summit is underway. So that is quite something, and it's showing us that President Biden was not able to shut down doubters.
Now, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg spoke a short while ago about Ukraine's prospects of joining NATO. Let's have a quick listen.
To invite a new ally, we need consensus. All allies agree that Ukraine will become a member, but it's too early to say exactly when that will happen. What I can say is that we are moving together with Ukraine closer and closer to NATO membership.
Jens Stoltenberg speaking there. Alexandra, what are you hearing then about the timeline for Ukraine's membership?
Well, I don't think that we are going to see any concrete timeline for Ukraine's membership. We expect leaders to state in their declaration that Ukraine's path towards NATO membership is irreversible and that they will become a member when allies agree and the conditions will be met, meaning that Ukraine still has to implement important reforms. This document is, however, still under negotiation, and there are some NATO countries who are saying, yes, it's important for Ukraine to become a member, because if they don't, then that will have consequences and Putin will feel emboldened. But there are still big NATO countries, such as the US first and foremost, but also Germany, who have taken a more cautious stance. They are pointing to the fact that allies regard an attack on one of them as an attack on all of them. So they are saying, what will it mean in case of Ukraine if the war continues, if Ukraine decides to take back, for instance, Crimea? Will that drag NATO into the conflict? So those are the kind of conversations that are taking place behind the scenes.
DW correspondent Alexandra von Nahmen there reporting from the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Alexandra.
And we can get more context now from Liz Schuelke, a U.S. policy expert who joins me in the studio. So good to have you here. Now, this is the last NATO summit before the presidential election in the U.S. There is a lot of talk about Trump-proofing the alliance. What do you think those efforts could look like?
I mean, already as discussed, front and center, that will be Ukraine. What kind of support, both financial. Alexandra was talking about the approved package from the states that's already been put through. That's vital to kind of Trump-proof the U.S. financial support. But also that talk of what does that bridge look like? What does that membership path look like? There's conversation around making that membership path irreversible. And there's been talks from, kind of sources from the White House saying the White House supports that language and putting something in place now that if the conditions are met, couldn't be undone if things go sideways for the U.S. in November.
Mm-hmm. Some analysts are calling this a week of reckoning for Joe Biden. How do you expect the discussion that is happening, not only inside the country, about his fitness to continue in office, to run for another term, to affect the summit?
I think it'll be really interesting, and we're going to have kind of two ways that it can affect it, as always, on policy and on political and political theater, one could say. So on policy, he has proved a strong ally. He runs on a record of expanding NATO, on supporting NATO. Already, the German chancellor has come out and said, I had a great conversation with him. He was alert. He was incredibly prepared. The new British prime minister also had really positive things to say. So as a policy, there may be less concern than that Biden can do the job and do it well than politics. And he has to both assuage the foreign leaders who feel like they really need him, as well as the public. He's going to do a press conference as this. Is he going to be strong? Is he going to be able to deliver his message and kind of make up and end that news cycle that came up after the debate?
Yep. But with all of this going on, even just the discussion that is kind of delegitimizing, isn't it? Is he the leader NATO needs right now?
Again, I think NATO and the American domestic political news are two different stories. I think Biden has consistently stepped up for NATO, made NATO stronger, brought in new partners, has pushed for that full funding from other countries, and has achieved a lot of it. So in that sense, in his policy staff, and remember, he's not the only one attending this. His staff is attending it, his advisors, important other officials. So yes, on that front, it's can he calm these fears that he's not up for the political theater task? And also, will he distract from the story? And that might be the case. And so, as you already said, this is going to be a testing week for him, and he's got to kind of cover both of those bases of actually getting his policy agenda through, which he seems very capable of doing, while also the thing he is less capable at, which is ending that news cycle and kind of assuring folks that he's up for the task.
Yeah. There is a very real possibility, though, that this might be his last summit as president. And Trump's team is reportedly working on a radical reorientation of NATO. What could that mean? As
already been discussed, it's not great news for the stability and future of NATO. One of the things they can talk about right now is, okay, if we Trump-proof, can we get through 4 years without the support of the U.S. or with a very different type of support? I think it creates a lot of instability in a time when an organization like NATO has been a source of stability, both in Europe and around the world. So they really need to look at what is the strength of the other partners? How is the UK? How is Germany? How are the new members living up to their end of the bargain so that if there is some instability in the U.S., NATO as an organization can continue on?
U.S. policy analyst Liz Schuelke, thank you so much.
Thank you.
U.S. President Joe Biden has insisted once again he intends to stay in the presidential race despite concerns about his mental capacity. In a letter to fellow Democrats in Congress, he said he would not be running if he didn't think he was, quote, the best person to beat Donald Trump. Biden asked them to stop speculating over his future, arguing that was only benefiting his competitor. Some Democrats have called on the president to step aside after his disastrous debate performance last month. Sheri Berman is a political science professor at Barnard College, Columbia University in New York. Professor Berman, thanks for joining us. President Biden came out really strong, calling on his critics in the Democratic Party to get back behind him as their candidate. Do you think it's going to work?
Well, that does remain to be seen, but the president and his supporters really came out today for the first time since that presidential debate very forcefully behind his candidacy, saying that he had every intention to see this campaign through, that he was able and eager to go head to head with Donald Trump, and that he had absolutely no intention of withdrawing, and that if the Democrats had wanted to beat Trump, that they needed to rally behind him and do that now.
Biden, of course, is trying to stem dissent within his own party. He also told critics today in an interview, quote, "If you don't like me, challenge me at the Democratic convention." What are the chances that could really happen, that there could actually be a challenge to him at the convention?
I would say the chances of that are very slim. And every day that goes by probably works in Biden's favor. That is to say that if they were going to switch horses, so to speak, the time to do that would be sooner rather than later, because it would give the party obviously time to be around a new candidate, to rally donors, to rally supporters, and all that kind of important stuff. So every day that goes by works in Biden's favor. And the chances of having some kind of contested convention are very, very slim, because it would be very bad for the party. And it really wouldn't give a new candidate time to kind of shape the narrative in a way that he or she would really need to confront Trump.
So do you see these dissenters who are calling for him to step aside, do you see them going silent?
No, I don't suspect that they will go silent, but their voices will diminish over time. That is to say that if there is no groundswell of support within the Democratic Party, so we've seen some representatives, that is to say people in the House of Representatives, call for Biden to step aside. We've seen a lot of media attention, but until we start seeing more Democratic elites and more perhaps donors, big donors, influential donors, chances are that you will not get that kind of groundswell of support. It has to happen soon, and it has to happen in a really overwhelming way. And today, as I said, that letter being part of this kind of renewed forceful push by Biden and his supporters to say, no, we're not going to step down, and we're going to fight this until we really feel like we have no choice whatsoever.
Well, speaking of donors, Biden is basically saying that, the doubters here are just a few elites, some of them donors, but that the regular voters in his party picked him as their candidate. How true is that?
Well, it's true in the literal sense, in that he was the overwhelming victor in the Democratic primary. So that is literally true. He had no real opponents, and the one or two people who put up some opposition to him, were marginalized almost completely. So it's true that he is the candidate of the Democratic Party. The question is, did the debate performance and renewed questions about his health, about his age, about his competencies, create enough doubt in the minds of both voters and the Democratic Party decision makers to change what was an overwhelming primary victory for Biden? And again, the Biden camp, Biden himself, is not going to go easily. He's going to fight this, and every day that goes by works, as I said, in his favor.
Sheri Berman, professor of political science at Barnard College in New York, thanks for speaking to us.
My pleasure.